Hey, what's going on everybody? This is Alvi from Techitron, and today we're bringing you our review of the Goldberg EVO VX1. Now Goldberg, as I mentioned in our unboxing video, is a new company entering the smartphone market in Bangladesh, and the EVO VX1 is their first entry-level smartphone. Now it costs 4,599 taka, and instead of talking anymore, I'm just going to dive into the review. Stay tuned. As always, we're going to start off with the design aspect of the device and talk about some of the hardware components as well. Now, first thing you see as soon as you pick up the device are these sizable bezels on either side of the screen. Now, the screen is 4 inches, so that doesn't really matter because regardless of the large bezels, it's still very easy to hold in your hand. On the bottom, we have capacitive keys, which surprisingly do not light up, but I guess that is a compromise that you have to make whenever you're considering the price point. Now please take a note of how many times I refer to the price point, because that is one of the main contributing factors to a lot of the features and limitations of this device. Moving on to the side, on the left hand we have the volume up and down buttons. Now this is metallized, not metallic, so don't get that confused, and it has a surprisingly good bit of responsiveness. On the other side we have the power button, which is again in very good reach simply because of the size of this device, and it's something that's really convenient because regardless of where you're holding the phone, you're always going to be in reach of it. Taking a look at the back, we have a removable plastic back with a sort of a matte finish, so it will not capture fingerprints, and that's always a plus point. On the bottom here we have a small speaker grill, and we'll take a more in-depth look into that when we take off the back cover. Up top we have the 3.2 megapixel camera along with the single LED flash. Now take note of how the device actually contours around the edges, so this is something I like to mention very often in my review. It feels very good in the hand. It feels like it fits in the hand, and you don't have to really struggle with any sharp points or maybe have a fear of it dropping out of your hand. When we took a look at the top, we have the 3.5mm headset jack along with the micro USB port, and I actually prefer to have it on the bottom, but it's okay. I mean, it gets the job done at the end of the day. Since we are talking about the headset jack, I'd also like to mention that when you're using the provided headphones, make sure you don't plug it in all the way inside, because for some reason the audio quality varies when you do that. So that's just a tip and another compromise, I guess, that you have to make whenever you're considering the price point. On the bottom we have a sizable chin, but I mean, again, it doesn't really deteriorate away from the experience of the device, and since it is so small and comfortable to hold in the hand, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. We've gone ahead and taken off the back here, and as you can see, it's a pretty nice back, and if I were to compare the material to anything, it would be similar to that of the Roar A50's backing. Keeping that aside, let's take a look at what we have inside. Now this is a 1750 mAh battery, and it's actually a pretty nice size for the price point again. On the bottom over here, as I mentioned before, we have the speaker grill. Now when we're talking about the speaker, it is adequately loud, but obviously nothing like boom sound, so don't even start comparing, please. It gets the job done whenever you're trying to watch a video, but if the background noise is very loud, you're gonna have a bit of difficulty trying to hear the audio clearly. Now when we look at this over here, we have 2 SIM card slots. I have my own SIM in here. Now both of these support 3G, so that's always a plus, and again, as I mentioned before, this is a micro SD card slot. On a final note, I'll just talk a little bit about the aesthetics of this device. First of all, it comes in 2 colors. One is black and the other is white plus black. So the front part is black regardless of which model you get. I personally preferred the white one, as I think the contrast and the combination of the 2 colors looks very nice. Aside from that, as you can see, it's actually got this sort of a hinge type of a device design over here, and I actually like it. And whenever you're considering the price point, again, I'm mentioning the price point, these type of features are really not available, so the additions over here are actually pretty appreciable. Now, the logo of Goldberg actually looks nice as well, since it is black on this white background, and I also like this thing that they've done around the camera. Now the camera doesn't stick out, and it's something that is really good because if you keep it down on a flat surface, you don't have to worry about it getting damaged or scratched. Next up, we're going to go and talk about the display a bit. Now first of all, I'd like to say that the display is very bright, and that's something that I didn't expect, especially at this price range. The brightness level goes very high, as well as reaching down to low enough levels so that it's easy and comfortable to read at night during the dark time. To talk a bit about some of the details of the display, we have a 4-inch 480 by 800 pixel display. And now that sums up to about a pixel resolution of 233 pixels per inch. To showcase some of the good qualities of the display, I'm just going to go through some of the wallpapers I have saved on my phone so that you can get an idea of the representation of the images and colors. Up next, we're going to take a tour of the software found on the EVO VX1, and as you can see right from the get-go, we have Android 4.4.2 KitKat running this device. Now the experience of KitKat over here is very close to stock. In fact, they're using Launcher 3, which is used by Google. So as you can see, the transition animations are as we've seen on 4.4 KitKat, and you even have your persistent search bar on top. Swiping from the top, you can see you get your notifications panel, and over here, clicking here just gets you through to your toggles. Now one thing I did notice was that the 2-finger swipe down gesture was not available, so if you want to get to your toggles, you have to click that button the second time. It's something really strange in this regard, because you find it on various other builds of 4.4 KitKat, but it's not present here. But it's not a major deal breaker or anything. It's just a small hindrance. In fact, what I did was I got a toggle over here just so I could access the things that I use the most. Now for my taste, this is actually a very good and very responsive operating system. 4.4 KitKat, as I mentioned before in a previous review, is really good for entry-level smartphones because of various optimizations that make this run very smooth and easily. Now even though we have 512 megabytes of RAM, as you can see, while I am going through the application drawer and just going through different things, it's working very smoothly. Over here in the recent apps menu, you have a small toggle here that can allow you to clear all your applications at once, as well as clear some RAM. Now this is something that is very vital since we only do have 512 megabytes in here. The version of Android found here is not pure stock, and that is not a thing that is taking away from the experience actually. What Goldberg has done is they've implemented gestures from the screen when it's turned off. So right now if I do sort of a V or a U, as you can see, it unlocks the screen and it works very well. Now to access these settings, all you have to do is go into settings and go into accessibility, and on the bottom part you'll find smart wake up. Over here there are some customization options for your gestures. As you can see, I chose the C to open my camera, and to paint M I'll control my music. You can customize this to quite a certain degree and add applications which will open when you do a particular gesture. So just to show you again, let me do a C here. And as you can see, it works very well and immediately opens the camera. Now a point to note, if you do have a lock screen pattern or a password set, you'll need to actually unlock through that pattern or password first. So that kind of makes it a bit redundant. But all in all, the implementation here is very well done and it works almost all the time. Another point to mention is that I haven't found this activating accidentally in my pocket, and that's something that happens with other smartphones that sometimes you might see, whoa, my pocket's getting hot. Why? Because the flashlight just magically turned on due to some gesture. That type of thing I have not run into, and that's a very good point here to mention. Finally, we get to talk about some of the performance aspects of this device. Let's start off with some of the specifications. First of all, we have a 1.3 GHz core processor by MediaTek, along with 512 megabytes of RAM. Now that might not sound like much, but as I mentioned in the software section, KitKat can handle this pretty well. Aside from that, we have a 3.2 megapixel camera on the back, along with a 0.3 megapixel camera up front. We also have an LED flash on the back. Now this phone does support dual SIM 3G, so that's a very good thing. Moving on to another aspect of the performance, let's talk about the battery life. Now battery life was a little weird for me. The first day it didn't make me through the whole day, but as I continued to use the device, battery life got better and better. Oftentimes I would make it through a full day with barely 4 or 5% charge left, but other times it would die near the end of the day. A point to note, Wi-Fi and 3G really do affect the battery life significantly. Sometimes I found that when I'm near a weak Wi-Fi signal, the battery life would drain very fast, but if you're on a strong signal, it'll be fine. And finally, we get to talk about the camera. So first things first, we have a 3.2 megapixel sensor on the back and a 0.3 megapixel sensor on front. So just talking by those numbers, you don't really expect much from the camera, and that is actually how we get the results from the camera, because they're not really anything stunning. Now, if you want pictures that look good, you'll have to take them in good light or daylight situations. Low light images just don't look that good. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of digital noise, and there's a lot of artifacts. So let's just take a look at the images that we took right now. As you can see, because of the low resolution of the camera lens, we don't get much detailed photos and you can't really zoom inside. Another point I'd like to mention, there is no autofocus, so you have to touch and get the focus. Now sometimes this worked just fine, but on other occasions I found it very difficult to get the focus, especially when the light was low. Moving to the gallery and looking through some of the other pictures that we took, colors don't look that bad actually, but then again, if you just take a little bit of a closer look, they feel a little washed out and they just don't appear as detailed. And I get it, it's because of the 3.2 megapixel lens, but there's nothing you can really do about it. This is the way it is. Now the front camera's pictures aren't really that good. Because of the 0.3 megapixel lens, things just look really bad. For example, in this picture, it was taken in some pretty good lighting conditions, but it just looks really, really dark. And this was taken with the front camera, and this is another example of that same picture. Now these are some more photos I took outdoors, and as you can see, things do look good in some of the images, but it tends to overexpose almost all the time. This image is a good example of an inability to gain the focus. I tried really hard, but the camera was just overexposing and you couldn't really focus onto the details of the image itself. Same goes for this image here. If you look into it a little closer, the focus wasn't where I wanted it to be, which was right about the head of this Autobot. The camera interface, on the other hand, is actually very good. You get a very stock-like camera experience from the old Jelly Bean days. And when you look at how quickly the images are captured, it's very responsive. Although I would like to mention that you should try and keep your hands as still as possible because the slightest bit of motion will give you some blur. Now recording video was about the same here, nothing really mention worthy. This brings us to the conclusion of our review. I'll just dive straight in and tell you something. What type of a consumer are you? If you're somebody who's looking to switch over from a feature phone that's for some reason runs Symbian right now, then you would consider the EVO VX1. If you're somebody who's running, for example, an old iPhone 4S, this phone really isn't for you because it's catered towards those who are just entering the smartphone market. At 4,599 taka, the specifications offered by the EVO VX1 are a complete steal. I tried Google searching and seeing what other things I can get at around the same price range, and most of the time there were many compromises and the specifications didn't really match up. Aside from that, it is running KitKat, and most of those devices were from a couple years ago and were on sale on eBay or Amazon. Now let's get into the summary of this device. What things are the determining factors of this review? Let's go in through some of the negatives first. Now first of all, the display resolution is kind of low, but then again, as I'm mentioning, the price point, it doesn't really matter, it's still good enough. Let's go into the second point. The camera is very... it's not that good, to be honest. And with that, you have a 3.2 megapixel camera on the back and a 0.31 in front. It's something that you kind of expected going into the review. And it's not really a detractor from the experience of the device itself because it still runs nice and smooth. And lastly, the specifications. Now we have 512 megabytes of RAM with a dual-core processor. Now I know the price is a constraint, but that's something that you really have to consider if you have, for example, an extra 1,000 or 2,000 taka to spare. If you do that, I suggest going for a device with a gigabyte of RAM and maybe a quad-core processor, because in the long run that will serve you better. Now let's move into some of the good points of this device. First of all, the screen is very bright and I could actually use it comfortably outdoors, and that's something I get to say about very few devices. Moving on, KitKat is almost stock, and I mean like the only difference is the addition of the gestures. So stock Android on a 4,599 taka phone. Think about it, this is a good offer. Let's move into the performance. This phone works very well and gives you very decent battery life given the size of the phone as well as the battery that packs inside. And then we have to talk about the accessories. We cannot forget the accessories. You get in-ear headphones that have tangle-resistant cables. Where do you find that at an entry-level game? Next, you get a flip cover for free, as well as a screen protector. Finally, the charger. The charger is very small, and it's very handy because you get to carry it around easily. And that's something that we don't even see from bigger name manufacturers, so that for me was a huge convenience point. At the end of the day, you also get removable storage and battery. So that's a very good buy, especially if you're trying to use this device for about a couple years. All in all, I'd like to say that the EVO VX1 is a very good device, especially given the price. Price. That is the only determining factor that will make you purchase this. If you have 2,000 or 3,000 taka extra to spare, you might not want to go for this because there are offerings with better specifications. But if you're switching over from a feature phone or just entering the Android market on a very low budget, this is the way to go. I really hope you enjoyed our review and didn't get annoyed at me babbling on for so long. So if you did enjoy the review, please like, share, and subscribe, and check out our Facebook page as well as our website. We also did an unboxing of the EVO VX1, so if you haven't checked that out yet, I suggest you do so. Thank you, stay tuned.